"Don't touch me, you stupid black girl." That's what he said, right there in the middle of the Four Seasons Beverly Hills. And if you've ever felt a room stop breathing, you know what I mean. It didn't matter that the band was still playing, or that the waiters were still gliding around like nothing happened, or that this was supposed to be the kind of night where billion-dollar deals get made and lost in the flick of a wine glass. No, those words shot through the air harder than a slap hard enough to shatter crystal and silence every power broker in the room. In that one moment, every phone tilted, every mouth went tight, and you could feel the collective shock because Charles Drake, the CEO, whose name was inked on every invite and every whispered rumor about a $3.5 billion deal, had just outed himself as the smallest man in the room. And you know what's wild? Naomi Ellis, she didn't flinch. She just stood there, holding her folded cloth, with a bottle of water in the other hand, and she didn't say a word, didn't blink, didn't apologize. I've watched people break in situations easier than that. But Naomi? She just stood tall. What nobody in that gilded room realized least of all Charles Drake, who was already annoyed about a few drops of Bordeaux on his jacket, was that Naomi wasn't some invisible waitress hustling tables to make rent. She was the adopted daughter of Elliot Strauss, the only man at that table whose word could flip the future of Drake Nova Technologies in a heartbeat. Naomi, who graduated top of her class, who ran track with Olympic dreams before life threw her a curve, who chose to be there to see how the world really works and maybe, just maybe, to set it straight. See, Charles didn't just insult a black woman or a waitress or someone beneath his notice. He insulted the one person he should have treated like royalty, right when the whole world was watching. Cameras were rolling. The deal that could have made or broken careers was hanging by a thread. And right there, in front of every heavy hitter in the room, Charles Drake made the kind of mistake you don't come back from. But let me back up a sec. Naomi wasn't born lucky. She was born resilient. By 26, she'd lived more life than most folks twice her age. Her mom was gone before she finished high school cancer, the kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye, just leaves you with bills and a silence so heavy you can't breathe. Her dad never stuck around. So the day after the funeral, Naomi became everything to her little brother Elijah, 10-year-old with cerebral palsy and a smile big enough to light up Los Angeles on a bad day. Naomi could have had it easy, if you call being a college track star on scholarship easy. But dreams don't pay rent. She walked away from a podium, picked up 3 jobs, worked 6 days a week, 2 overnights, just to keep Elijah in therapy, to make sure he had what he needed. She never played the martyr, never posted about her struggle. She just did the work, quietly, the way people who have no one but themselves to count on always do. People overlooked her. Sure, they saw almond eyes, soft skin, thought she was just another black girl behind a tray. Let them think it. Sometimes being invisible is the only armor you get. Naomi didn't need pity. She needed accesso. She chose the elite floor at the Four Seasons, not out of desperation, but out of strategy. She watched the world's most powerful men drink and deal, watched how real power moves, and saw how kindness is rare and cruelty, well, sometimes people clap for that. She learned, and she waited. So when Charles Drake called her out, Naomi didn't react. Queens don't need to. They remember. They rise when the time is right. Now, Charles Drake, yeah, the big shot in the tailored sway of believe business was war, and people were tools, only useful if they worked. He ran his company like a battlefield. People admired him or feared him, but everyone did what he said. He was the kind of boss who fired you for hesitating, not for failing. Never thanked the help. Never thought twice about who was pouring his wine. The problem was he thought everyone else in the room was a pawn. He never learned that sometimes the piece you ignore is the one that tips the whole board. That night, the ballroom looked like a dream white linen, flickering candles, string quartets soft as silk. It wasn't just a dinner, it was the dinner. The one where fortunes rise and fall on a smile or a word. Venture capital legends, media moguls, senators hiding behind their ties, all orbiting around Elliot Strauss, who didn't need to speak loud because his silence said everything. He was considering a $3.5 billion acquisition. The only question anyone had was, would Charles Drake close the deal? Naomi moved like music, quiet, essential, invisible. She had every detail down, every glass, every name. But nobody, not even her, could have planned for that moment. She came to pour wine for table 1. Charles, Elliot, their entourages. She leaned in, the glass tipped, red Bordeaux, spilled like a warning shot across Charles's jacket. Instinct kicked, Inch apologized, reached for the napkin. And that's when Charles said what he said. Loud enough to kill the music, quiet enough to be intentional. You know what I mean? That kind of moment doesn't just bruise your ego. It bruises your soul. And Naomi stood there. She didn't look away, didn't offer anger, just a calm resolve that settled over her like a shield. Around her, the room tried to move on, but it was a lie. Everybody felt the crack under Charles's feet, even if he didn't yet. Elliot Strauss, she didn't react, not right away. He'd seen men like Charles his whole life. His mother taught him to watch, not to rush in. People always show their truth when they think no one important is watching, she used to say. Tonight, Charles showed his truth. Unfortunately, someone important was watching. Elliot noticed Naomi's grace, the way she carried herself after that moment. He also noticed the pause, the tiny hesitation behind her eyes, the split second where you decide to break or rise. Naomi chose to rise. Elliot leaned over, whispered to his assistant in German. The wheels started turning. Meanwhile, Charles tried to act like nothing happened. He kept pitching, kept talking, even louder than before, pushing numbers and ROI, trying to bulldoze his way past the crack he'd just made in his own foundation. But Elliot was done with numbers. Before we discuss numbers, he said, I prefer to observe values. A cold wind moved through the table. Everybody heard what that meant. Naomi kept working, serving with grace. Even as Charles muttered under his breath, tried to diminish her, she kept her poise. But when she returned to refill his water, he grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise, just enough to remind her who he thought was in charge. You wait until I finish speaking, he hissed, as if that was the rule. Naomi just met his eyes, calm and unbroken, and said, Yes, sir, I understand completely. Then she gently pulled her wrist away, didn't miss a beat. Dignity unshaken. That's when Elliot stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough to make the whole room freeze. He looked at Naomi, then turned to Charles and said, Before we move forward, there is someone very important I'd like you to meet properly. Charles was confused. Of course he was. He thought power was about position. He didn't know Naomi stood next to Elliot, not behind him. This, Elliot said, resting his hand on Naomi's shoulder, is Naomi Ellis, my daughter. The air cracked. She'd been working there by choice, to see how people treated those they believed beneath them. Tonight, you all witnessed exactly that. He didn't need to yell. The truth did all the heavy lifting. The girl you called stupid is the woman I raised to be wiser than most CEOs I've met. That's all it took. The deal was dead before dessert. People started getting up, one by one, then in waves. Phones blew up with news. Strauss pulls out of Drake Nova deal after public incident. Drake Nova stock dropped 17% before anyone touched their cake. Charles Drake's phone melted down with panic calls from board members, PR teams, investors. But you can't spin viral video. Not when the world's already watching. Within hours, sponsors bailed, partners cut ties, employees resigned. The company Charles built crumbled not because of bad numbers, but because the rot at the center was finally exposed. Arrogance has a price. That night, it was $3.5 billion and the fall of an empire. Before sunrise, Charles was out. Naomi was in. Naomi Ellis walked into Strauss Holdings the next morning, not as a waitress, but as director of corporate humanity. Her new title wasn't just a gesture, it was real power, with authority to make sure what happened to her would never happen under her watch. Later that day, she addressed the entire company, San Francisco to Singapore, everyone tuning in, some having only seen her in viral clips. Yesterday, she said, I was called stupid, not because I made a mistake, but because someone thought their title made them more human than me. I said nothing then, but today I choose to speak. She talked about the difference between power and leadership. One is taken, the other is earned. I believe in companies where people are valued, not just for what they produce, but for who they are. Every role deserves dignity. Every title deserves accountability. Every voice, especially the quiet ones, deserves to be heard. The applause was real. People saw in Naomi not just a new leader, but a mirror. What happened in that ballroom wasn't about one CEO, one waitress. It was about all of us. How we treat people when we think nobody's watching at the drive-thru, in a meeting with someone who can't help our career on the other end of a phone line. Those are the moments that define us, not our titles, not our deals. And Naomi, she reminded everyone strength can be quiet. Dignity isn't given, it's lived, and real leadership is about who listens, not who talks loudest. Maybe next time you're tempted to brush someone off or let something small slip, you'll ask yourself if that person held your future in their hands. Would you be proud of how you treated them? Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one at the head of the table. Sometimes it's the one clearing it. So if you believe dignity should never be optional, that every person matters, share this story. Let someone else remember being decent isn't extra credit. It's the baseline. How we treat each other is the real legacy we leave behind. And it starts with you and me right now. What would you have done if you were in that room? Would you have stood up or stayed silent? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about what justice and decency really mean, not just in business, but in our lives.